Ah, there we go. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. So you're here for this session. If you're here by mistake, stay. First things first, my voice is jacked. Sorry for that. I suddenly and inexplicably got laryngitis on the plane here. So I've been drinking a lot of tea, and hopefully we'll get through these 40 minutes. And by hopefully, I mean definitely. So let's start with the world's most exciting slide. Please make your purchasing decisions based on products and features that are currently available. We'll talk about roadmap in the Flow Builder a little bit toward the end. I'll call that out explicitly. Anything that you see in the build today is going to be stuff that's available. Here's our agenda. We'll start with some introductions. I won't be able to meet each of you individually, but I have some general questions for you. Then we'll go through a build specifically related to how Flow Builder can increase your velocity as a developer. We'll summarize what we've found through that build, and then I've got some next steps for you if you want to continue your journey using Flow Builder. But before we do that, I want to say thank you very much. I mean this very genuinely. I've had an amazing experience so far at Trailhead DX, and round of applause to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Everyone that I've had a chance to talk with so far has been incredibly open and warm, and a lot of ideas being kicked around. So thank you for being here, and thank you for making Salesforce great. This is me, and that's another picture of my head. I am Jay Stedman. Jay is actually my name. Ask me to see my driver's license after the session. I will show you. I have a bucket of certifications. Isn't that neat? I started as an admin with 36 licenses totally by mistake. I have a master's degree in acting, and I used to play music for a living. I ended up my customer career. I had 2,000 licenses, and I was a product manager at a business that had about $3.5 billion in revenue. We had 13 business units in a single multi-tenant org, and we were SOX compliant. So good governance and best practices in development, application lifecycle management became kind of a thing for me, and I hope to share some of that with you through the lens of Flow Builder. 3 fun facts about me. I'm into super esoteric board games. Most of my board games weigh about 12 pounds. Yeah? I figured we'd have a few people here that were into that. I mentioned bass guitar for a living, so pyrotechnics on a stage. And I'll save my third one for just a moment. I have a few questions for you guys, if that's okay. I don't mean to engage too soon in the process, but let's do it. How many of you consider yourselves to be full-time developers? Okay, great. And how many of you consider yourselves to be full-time administrators? Oh, great, we have a 50-50. This is perfect. That's important. I also want to know a few other things. And real quick, could we get the timer to start? I just want to make sure. I love these people so much. I don't want to. Thank you very much. How many of you work at a small business, say less than 50 employees? Okay, mid-commercial, a few hundred employees. Good. And how many of you work at an enterprise where we've got lots and lots and lots of employees? Great, 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 great. So most of us are enterprise folks, but a nice chunk of mid-commercial. That's important to the conversation. So the third fun fact is I just got back from a vacation to Australia, just got back. It was fantastic, but I found some of Australia confusing. It was my first time driving on the opposite side of the road and the opposite side of the car. I found it really hard to get to where I was going, and on top of that, everything in Australia is a roundabout. Anyone here from Australia? No? Well, they have a lovely country. So I needed to kind of figure out how to navigate the space, and I promise this is pertinent. So I called up my friend Brant, and I said, Brant, can you help me figure out Australia? And Brant said, Jay, I have an idea. So this was Brant's idea. That's me strapped to Brant's chest, and we jumped out of a plane at 15,000 feet, and at first I was really confused. Things got cloudy. It did not make sense to me how doing this would help me understand Australia. But the clouds parted, and eventually I did, in fact, understand the lay of the land. And I was able to navigate to where I was going. So I'm giving you this story because we're going to start at a high level, but we're going to get real deep real fast. I know in these sessions, people tend to bounce out in the first 3 minutes. That's okay if you do, but I promise we're going to get to some juicy stuff. So we show this slide a lot. We've updated it for Trailhead DX, and I really believe in it. Derry did a great job on this, and Derry's here. Thank you so much, product marketing manager for Flow Builder. We talk a lot about how consumers really expect great experiences and how 80% of consumers value the experience that they have with a brand almost as much as, or as much as, the product or service that they consume from that brand. But what we've often overlooked in these conversations is that 71% of our employees are taking their expectations as consumers and applying them to their experiences in the enterprise. And that's a big deal. They expect enterprise software to be as seamless and as easy to use and as engaging as shopping on Amazon. And that's a tough ask. So whether we're talking about replacing a credit card, if it's a consumer, or if we're talking about resolving a case, if it's an employee, they have this expectation of a lot of automation, right? You need these automated interactions to meet these expectations. But there is a challenge, and this is a challenge for all of my developers in the room. This is our bread and butter. It's what we do every day, all day long. For a lot of my admins, it's the same thing. We got to build the stuff, and that's a pain. We've got to actually get that logic in place. We've got to build the user interface, and we've got to integrate our systems, right? That takes time, and traditionally, it takes resources that tend to be more expensive. And on top of that, we've got a bit of a conflict between two sides of the same conversation. We've got the business, and we've got IT. And they're locked in an internal battle with each other. And when I say internal, I mean eternal. It never ends. So on the one side, we've got the business that's expecting these great consumer-grade experiences, and they want to improve every process, but they can't build any of it. And then on the other side, we've got developers, and they're really trying to burn down that list, and they're really trying to get through the backlog, and they really want to build reusable tools, and can you please stop throwing wood onto the fire? See, at this point, my voice is kind of cool. It works for an effect. So let's talk about developer output, right? So when we look at developer output, developers have never been more productive than they are today, which is dope. And there are so many cool things that have been released at this Trailhead DX and at other events that we've had. Tooling is really coming into the fore, which is great. But let's crack developer output open, and at the core of it, this is the high-value stuff. This is the stuff that only a developer can do, right? That's great. What about the rest of it? These are the minor tweaks. These are the slight changes. This is the positioning. These are the things that don't really need a developer's attention, but we're assigning the task to a developer. That developer might take more in terms of time because we have more rigorous testing, and testing is important no matter what we do, but we might have a more rigorous or more formalized governance process. They're more expensive in dollars for sure. And so the question is, do we want our developers to be spending all of that time on minor tweaks when the backlog looms like a dwarf star? Dwarf stars are big, right? Yeah. And when that happens, we've got this looming backlog. We might have a few things. One, every project that we release, we own, and we have to continue maintaining that. So our maintenance requirements go up. Each percentage of our sprint might increase sprint after sprint. Second, our hours might increase. We don't all have the luxury of infinite headcount and to scale. We might just have to work more hours. And lastly, I think this is truly the one that's most difficult to measure, but probably has the biggest impact to cost. Innovation goes down. We stop doing cool stuff because we have to tweak that UI one more time. So this is where the conversation about Flow Builder and how Flow Builder can help you as a developer get more stuff done really comes into play. Because we have tools on platform for people in this room that can't write code but can take your code and plug it into a flow, so you've written much less, they've done a little bit more, and everyone becomes slightly more happy. I can't promise permanent happiness. That seems unreasonable. So I want to talk to you about a use case, and we're not going to build this use case, but it's important to know the use case before we step into it. Cool? So use case is pretty simple. We're going to be in Sales Cloud. Our marketing operations end users are currently using campaigns for in-person events, and they would like to group attendees into 5 segments. The segment criteria is never going to change. So we have hundreds of attendees at an event. Maybe it's something like Trailhead DX. And based on information we have in the CRM, we want to segment those audience members, those campaign members. The marketing users want to choose actions to take against these segments. And they expect that these changes are going to happen pretty frequently. So I might want to update a record now, but in 2 weeks I might want to delete a record, but in 2 weeks I might want to update a different record, but in 2 weeks I might want to create a different record, okay? Because marketers like to experiment, and that's cool, as long as it doesn't bind us as an IT organization. All right, so that's enough of that. I'm going to hit escape, and let's get into a build. Is that fair? Yeah. I'm going to take off my jacket but not kill the mic. Scott would be very upset at me. Okay. So here we are in my Salesforce instance. I am on a campaign. It's called Trailhead DX Session. Imagine that. I've got 1.1 thousand campaign members here. You'll note on the record page, I have a tab that says Segment Actions, and I'm going to click into that tab. So here I've got the name of the segment as well as the total count of people in the segment. Now I'm actually querying the account, and I'm looking at whether or not there is an upsell opportunity on the account. I'm also looking at whether or not that account has a rating of hot, warm, or cold. Those are the things that determine this segmentation. Now I get to choose an action. I can choose to create a follow-up task, which is a task assigned to the contact owner in the future. So let's go ahead and do that on the first segment. You'll see a nice little toast message pop up. The second segment has 200 folks in it, and I'm going to choose to nurture these folks. So that's actually going to change their status as a campaign member. It's going to change it to nurture. That'll drive some actions later on in the marketing life cycle. Now, for segment C, these are people that we targeted to meet with during the event, so I'm actually going to log a call against them. And we're going to continue this process. So we will create 150 follow-ups. Okay, 465 records in this last segment, and we're going to change those to nurture too. And let's just pay attention to the processing time here. We see that it takes a little bit longer. There are more records. That's okay. Got another toast message. Great. So the flow is completed. If you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that our events and our tasks have been created. If we look back at the related list, you'll see here that the status has actually been changed. So I have, let's see, I have 665 of the people in the campaign have been updated to nurture. I've got tons and tons of activities. I can view more. We'd see them here. So both tasks in the future, tasks in the past, right? So we've just created hundreds of records and updated hundreds of records. Fine. We're going to talk about two things. One, what did we do to do that? And then two, we want to improve the experience a little bit. So there are a few things that we want to build and add on to this. And I'm going to show you how quick and easy that is. All right. So this is the flow. This is the whole thing. So to my developers in the room, we talk about reusability. This is all about reusability. Of the elements that are on this screen, virtually all of them are reused. I want to focus on first we'll talk about the general functionality that's happening here, and then we're going to dive into the specifics a little bit. So I'm actually using Apex for the query. Apex is looking at the contacts and all related accounts and returning segments. So it pulls the query, filters and segments the query into 5 different lists, and then makes those lists available to flow. That's the only developer responsibility in this flow. Nothing else is code, okay? So because in our use case, the segmentation never changes, that's rock solid. And because the rest of the actions can be handled by somebody else, for the most part, all we have to deal with as developers is maintaining our query should anything drastically change there. From there, we count everything, and then we loop through logic for each one of these segments. And I've made that modular, so we can reuse it. We feed it variables, it gives us variables, and then we aggregate collections of records that we get from each of those. We run an update DML, which is, again, a reusable component, and that's it. That's the flow. I want to give a huge shout out. Anyone on Twitter follow a Salesforce MVP by the name of Amnon Kruvy? He goes by Kruvman on Twitter. He provided us this class, and he's a huge fan of Invocable Apex. He has musicals for Invocable Apex. He presents them as sessions. Check it out if you get a shot. We have 89 lines of code here, and at the end of the day, what we need to know here is at the bottom. I pass in a campaign ID, and I receive back 5 lists of campaign members, okay? That's what this does. And after the session, I can make this code available to everyone if you'd like to parse through it a little bit deeper. By using the @invocable method tag, Flow and Process Builder can see it. It's worth calling out right off the bat, this is valuable because the query alone is very taxing for flow. The flow engine has limits like everything. There are governor limits. And by choosing expensive transactions and making them into modular, invocable Apex, a developer is able to empower other people to worry about the fine details, what the user interface looks like, et cetera, and still give the power that they need to the process. Cool. So from the Apex, I want to kind of talk about how we want to improve this process. So there are a few things about the experience I didn't super like. First, if we have a longer wait time, I want to make sure that I have a second toast message letting me know that a larger group of items is processing. I don't want to sit there for 5 seconds as I look at 500 records processing. So I want to add a toast message from that. That's requirements we got back from our marketing users. Additionally, we want an email notification to be sent out to our marketing users, letting them know exactly what happened. So we're going to add that into the mix as well. We want to add a fourth option also. Not only do we want to create tasks, create logged calls, and update records, we also want to delete some campaign members because sometimes segment E sucks. Okay? So let's go ahead and do that so we can see how long it takes to actually produce these changes. So the first thing that I want to show you guys is the user interface. I'm just displaying some variables that are formatted. So I've got the name of the segment as well as the count of the segment. But this pick list is actually downloaded from the App Exchange. How many of you are familiar with Flow Magic pick lists? Okay. How many of you are familiar with Flow solutions on the App Exchange? Great. You guys, there's stuff on the App Exchange for Flow. And you can download actions, you can download whole flows. Soon we're going to have templates, so you can download a template and then customize it. So Flow Magic pick lists allows me to assign visual values to existing pick list values. And the way that I do this is I prefer custom metadata types. So I've created a custom metadata type here, and I've got a pick list called segment. I'm going to come into that pick list called segment, and I'm going to create a new value. I'm going to call that value remove. Okay, we've got our new value. That's awesome. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to reload the editor. When you have lots of tabs, reload. So I'm going to select my custom metadata type object. And I'm going to select my field. And you'll see here, we've got the checkbox, we've got the people, we've got the phone call, and I've also got this new option for remove. So I'm going to edit it. What do we think, red X or trash can? Trash can. That was surprisingly vocal. People have strong feelings about what it is to remove something. All right, great. So cool. We've used the custom metadata types, and we've updated Flow Magic pick list, so we now have 4 options. I'm going to go back into Flow Builder. We talked about that consumer-grade experience, right? If we add a 4th option, I want to make sure that I know that this thing looks nice. So I'm going to reload this tab again since we're on our screen. Now, when we break down our segment logic, I have a screen that's a subflow, and I have logic that's a subflow. So I have modular items inside of modular items. Developers, can you believe it? All right, so let's look at our segment actions, and let's just debug this to take a look at what we see. Don't need to pass any variables in. That looks okay on this page. I have a feeling that when I throw it on the record page, though, let me double check my sizing. I want to make sure that the tiles are the right size. I'm going to change this to medium because I have a feeling it's going to be ugly on the record page. So I just changed a variable of that component that I dragged into the page, okay? And that's it. The user interface is updated. So if I come back here and I reload my page, nice. I've got my 4 tiles. I've got my 4 options. Now, nothing's going to happen if I click remove because we don't have any business logic in place yet. So why don't we go ahead and move forward and create some business logic? So this is my segment master. You'll see here that we have a screen subflow, we have a logic subflow, and then we have that success toast. Now, I mentioned that I wanted to do something when I've got a large number of records to process. So let's take a look at what creating that toast would look like. Then we'll jump into the logic and actually worry about getting those deletes to happen, okay? So I deleted the connector between the screen and the second logic, and I'm actually going to put in a decision. And we'll call this large segment, question mark. is large. That will be the outcome. And we're going to look at the incoming campaign members, and we're going to say, actually, we want the variable of the incoming campaign members, so segment count. And if it is greater than 199, we are going to go ahead and do that. Great. And then I need to grab a core action. So Toast message is pretty cool. I went to a website, unofficial flow. I downloaded Toast actions. Now I can toast. So I've got two variables here that I can input. One is a message. We'll call this processing. And I can give it a type. We're going to say that this is info. Done. And I got to name it process toast. Whenever I'm creating these elements, I get a little hungry. I got like one sad sigh. Okay, so we're going to say that this is the default outcome, and we're going to say here, if the collection is large, go ahead and process. Great. So now we're still hitting the logic, we're still hitting the updates, but we have a new toast message if we've got a large collection. So let's actually crack into the logic. So this is my logic engine. Is anyone familiar with flow patterns and loop? I'm sorry, loop patterns and flow? This is how they work. You have a loop element, an assignment element to give values to a record, another assignment element to give those records to a collection, and then it goes back to the loop, okay? So I have 3 loops. That's what control my 3 actions. To do a delete assignment, it's actually pretty easy. I just need to take the incoming campaign members and put them in a collection. So we're going to say incoming campaign members. Actually, we'll do delete output equals incoming campaign members. You guys, it's done. That was it. Now let's add a decision element here. Oh, stuck on moving around mode. Delete. And we're going to call this, if the segment choice equals remove, done, delete, yep, save, great. Now we have a 4th branch of logic. So we have the user interface, we have the logic. What's the only piece that's missing? Yeah, we got to touch the database. So let's talk about that. So our last piece is our DML statement. So here we have a series of questions. Do I have any records in my first collection? If I do, create those records. Do I have any records in my second collection? If I do, update those records. Now we're going to create a 3rd one, right? It's going to be pretty simple. So it's going to be a new decision element. Remove all deletes. Actually, it's going to be counting a variable. Total deletes greater than 0. Done. Cool. And then this is the easiest thing of all. To delete those records, all I have to do is say, give it a name, delete records, and I just need the record collection that I'm going to delete. So I've selected that record collection. Cool. That's going to be remove. And even if I update records, I still want to process the next transaction. That's it. So we've now processed that logic. All right. So that's everything that we needed to do to actually get our 4th option functional. Fingers crossed, and if the demo gods are on my side. Lots of tabs open. Who knows? I mean, I think I know. So let's test this out. Let's create some, we talked about email action just for the sake of time because I don't know when the timer started. I'm going to move on without that. Trust me that it works the same way that the toast messages do. So, creating some tasks. So we've got 200 records here. We should hope to see that processing message. We got the processing message. Great. Let's remove these guys. And let's log calls here. And let's remove these guys too. Processing, perfect. So we should see a bunch more records generate. And let's look at a related list. We should have a lot less. We only have 500 folks here, okay? So that's pretty cool. Let's jump back into the presentation. There we go. So in about 15 minutes time, you're going to see, I think there are two elements that we kind of skipped over. We have an updated UI. We have new segmentation logic. We have a processing toast message. Really cool, you can actually have flow finish behaviors. So typically when I build this out, I actually reload the page back to the initial campaign while the final processing is happening. Kind of eases the burden on our end users. We have a completion toast message, and we didn't build it in here, but you can also have that email message that sends out the total actions that were completed. And we did that using all repeatable modular tools. So we used the app exchange, we used custom metadata types, we used subflows, we used decision elements and delete elements. And then the rest of it was all local actions. Those local actions are all built. No one had to build them. The developers didn't have to build them. I didn't have to build them. All I do is give them inputs and outputs, okay? There was no new code aside from that Apex that we put into a modular piece. So let's do a little bit of myth busting. This is actually what the flow would look like if I were to build the query that returns the segments. But instead, I partner with the developers in my org to write a really nice, clean, complex query, package it into invocable Apex, and I use that Apex action inside of my flow, which frees my flow up to do the business logic. This is actually what the flow would look like if you were to build it all in one screen. It's really hard to look at, and when I sent it to Derry was like, Jay, what are you doing? Think about our image. So instead we have this, right? And these subflows are great. I've actually drawn out what each one of them calls on here. They're very nice, they're very clean. You can use them here and you can use them elsewhere, right? And it ends up looking like this. And guys, definitely love the photos, and I will make those slides available to you after as well, because I want to make sure that you've got a nice, clean, like I put in the animations, you know? This is the architecture of the flow, right? So for the developers in the room, when we're talking about how can this thing be built out, please note that like all of this stuff is reused. The segment subflow is used 5 times. The count subflow is used twice. Anything that's in gray is an action, which can be reused an infinite number of times. And the only thing that was created from scratch in the campaign segment master flow was this assignment element. That's it. So the entire process was just drag and drop. So there's a myth that flow building might be labor intensive. I've already mentioned that you can download a lot of this stuff either from the App Exchange or unofficial flow at unofficialsf.com. There's tons of options that are available to you. So find out what you're trying to do, see if it already exists, and grab it. Just like Lightning components that are available to you, flow actions are available to you as well. There's an idea that flows may be difficult to maintain. Here on the screen, you'll see that some variables are hard-coded, some are based on other variables. Well, custom metadata types. They're in your org. How many people are using custom metadata types? Yes, this is wonderful. I hope that continues. You can reference them in Flow. I believe that the support and process builder is increasing as well. I use them for flows all the time. Just store your data there, update it in a single place. And devs don't have to do it alone. So the great part about this is the only thing that required a developer for this business process was that invocable method. Everything else could be built by a person that knows how to use Flow Builder. Now, it doesn't have to be an admin, right? Anyone who can build in Flow. So what does this do? How does this increase velocity? Well, first, the high-value stuff is still done by the devs. But those minor tweaks can be done by devs or builders, and that really pushes the border out of this middle space. So if you use it right, you can get more done in the same amount of time. Now, you'll note that the dwarf star doesn't disappear, and that's because I can't promise that you've got the end to your backlog. Chances are it'll always be there. But I hope to make it skinnier. Okay. A little bit of roadmap here. So the biggest hurdle in building flows is honestly just creating variables. It's on roadmap now, future release. that all variable generation is going to be handled by the flow builder. This is pretty darn significant, and in terms of building time, we estimate that it can save up to 50% of build time. And as a dude who builds primarily in Flow, I can tell you that's like I love that. I'm super into it. Don't have a release date on it yet, but do keep an eye out for it. Pre-built flows and processes, that's available now and coming out now, right? All the stuff that I grabbed is GA, so nothing in my flow is a hidden Salesforce mystery secret. Please go use it, I insist. Support for other actions, other objects, external objects, that's coming soon. And then we've got improved monitoring, improved testing, improved analytics. All of that's coming as well, right? You'll see that there's a really nice visual dashboard here. We understand that it's a pain to test. We understand it's a pain to kind of debug. And we understand that it's a pain to look at what's happening here. And we definitely want to improve that experience. In the very, very near term, what you should find is all of the tools available in Flow Builder are going to get really nice and slick. You're going to have a copy elements feature. We're going to have undo, redo. Just a lot of usability stuff that's going to help you when you're kind of putting your flow together. There's a governance structure if you're trying to adopt Flow, right? The first thing is you have to know flow limits and scale. Devs, just because Flow has limits doesn't mean it shouldn't be used. You should just know what they are. Once that's the case, actually incorporate Flow into your development lifecycle, by which I mean to say, allow people to choose Flow as a solution. You can't use it if you don't, okay? Once you've got a process in place and you understand how the technology works, teach the people who are supposed to use it to build it. If you give somebody the responsibility, make sure that they know how to actually do it. Then worry about divvying up time between all of your builders, admins, and devs. And then lastly, worry about extending your flows. Developers primarily worry about this part. Call Apex from Flow. Call Flow from strange triggering situations that happen on delete or after update. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. Got a lot of resources available on Trailhead. There are other sessions that are coming up as well. Again, these slides will be made available to you guys. And then lastly, we have some sessions that are coming up tomorrow. There's an additional session at 8:30 a.m. that's a hyper-popular one. Might want to check that out. We have a super session building together with low code tomorrow at 11. Do we have any idea on the time? This ends at 40? Yeah. So we have some minutes. Let me take some of one to say thank you very, very much. We can either do questions off the stage or we can do a couple of questions on the stage. Thoughts, questions, comments, concerns? How's my driving? All right, I'll take it off stage. Thank you very much, guys.